Hello, welcome to Better Conversations. We're live, so anything that happens here is stays here. So I'm joined again by Ben Miller. So this is we're going to be part 3 of our series on cognitive diversity. So yep, we're here most Tuesdays. We like to take breaks. We think that's good, and you should too. We're wonderful, but maybe you want to watch something else sometimes. But do come back and check us out. You'll find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and of course you can get to us on betterconversations.live. How are you feeling, Ben?
I'm all right today. Yeah, sun's shining on me, so I'm pretty happy. What about you?
It's a good day. Yeah, it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'll take that. So hopefully wherever you are, it's also sunny. It won't be on the east coast of Australia, which is 10 p.m. their time, but in the States, hopefully, North America, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, in Europe, Central European Time, and in India at 5:30. So we're talking about leaders and design. So in the context of understanding maybe you yourself as a leader are neurodiverse, you have members of your team who are neurodiverse. So Ben, you are the author and creator of our new course, Diversity of Thought for Leaders, we've been talking in the previous 2 episodes about why now is a really important time and thinking differently. Do you want to just give us a recap of what we talked about in those? And what we'll also do, folks, is if you're watching the recording, the links to those episodes will pop up on the screen, so feel free to explore those. But yeah, Ben, little recap.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth a quick recap. So in the first episode, we talked about why this, why now. So why should leaders be interested in cognitive diversity, or perhaps they've seen neurodiversity or cognitive diversity in headlines. So we just explored that there's a few societal trends happening at the moment, and whether it's emerging science and the brain almost being like a final frontier of scientific discovery, or perhaps the replication crisis in psychology, where the kind of experiments are not able to be taken from the lab into the real world. So maybe we're misunderstanding human intentions and behavior, and even like the latest technology as well. So any of our smart devices, our digital devices, they're an extension really of our cognition. So if one of our basic functions of how we think is to process information, we're outsourcing a lot of that thinking to our phones, to AIs, and that's a habit of humans. We kind of, when we designed fire, we outsourced some of our digestive processes to heat, and that allowed us to increase our intake in nutrients. And so and with transport, a car is an extension of our ability to move, and so we tend to design these things around limitations. And so we've created a really complex world, and there's lots of things to try and understand. So we outsource a lot of this cognition to tools. So there's just a few things, but you've got mental illness as well. So the health of our minds and brains are not particularly great. So whichever way you look at it, there's multiple reasons to be interested in how we think and how we think differently. And of course, from a leader's point of view, also there's a performance benefit as well. And it's also through another lens, another subgroup, if you like, of organizational diversity as well. And so whether you look at it as another separate category, or whether it's part of a holistic view of human nature and the many ways we're different, that might be depending on how you think about the world and which hemisphere you use. And so that kind of comes on to the last week's conversation, what is cognitive diversity? And we can think about it in so many different ways. We can think about the brain is hugely complex and it's wired in totally unique ways, and so the way that we think, the way that we communicate, the way that we learn, the way that we solve problems is unique to us. But there are patterns, and perhaps the extreme end of these patterns, you might find people with autism or with dyslexia or with ADHD or many other kind of presentations or types. And we just talked about Ian McGilchrist's work, which debunked a lot of the oversimplification of what the two hemispheres do. And so rather than asking what do they do, he asked how do they do the same things differently. So in the 1960s, we used to say that the left was for logic and reason, and the right for emotion and creativity. And he's debunked that through a lot of his work, and he reframes it as how do they do the same things differently? And each hemisphere has different takes on reality, different goals, different values, and different capacities. And just highlighting one kind of reference here, the right is more oriented towards the big picture, the whole, the context, and the left is more focused in on the details. And we need both of those to both understand the full context of where we are and who we are, but also specific kind of details so we can take appropriate action in the world. And both hemispheres can't focus on both the big picture, everything all around us, and the details at the same time. And so his hypothesis is that we evolved to our hemispheres evolved to do two completely different challenges, one which was to eat and the other one was to not be eaten. And so we needed to grab, but we also needed to understand the world in its full context. So I think that just sums up.
That is. Yeah. Every time I hear you talk through that, there's another thought that occurs to me. And the one that you said at the very beginning of the recap was, we outsource things. So we create these tools like cars and so on to liberate us or give us freedom, but then bound within them is, our constraints. And they work if you follow the rules of how that system works. But they don't always give us the flex to maybe do something differently, or even get us to trigger us to think about it doing things differently, because that creates variability. And as humans, we kind of like predictability. We like to know what's coming. Some of us don't like surprises. And so even good ones, right? Some people don't like that. So I think what I love about your course is the challenging of the way that we're seeing things, challenging and getting us to reconsider what we've taken for granted in the way that we function at work and the way that we lead as well. Okay, and so today is about design. We're looking at why that's important. But could you, thinking differently is important. Acting differently is important as a leader. Why should leaders be also thinking about design?
Yeah, I think if we think about cognitive diversity and why it's on the agenda, I think there's a realization that actually the way that we design work and workplaces doesn't really get the best out of people. And so we still have this, we're like like the chimera, where we have like different sort of parts. So we have like medieval, no, we have Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions and godlike technology, which E.O. Wilson talked about, that actually we don't have these kind of clean breaks, and we still have this industrial mindset where we create workplaces and systems and environments which are roughly one size fits all, and we kind of prioritize efficiency and predictability and control over perhaps flexibility and creativity. And so I think to get the best out of cognitive like diverse people, we need to be prepared to experiment and change everything that we do in the workplace, because everything could be different, and understanding maybe the kind of patterns of ideas about how we structure work, how we evaluate performance, how we kind of think about work, what it actually is, and how we go about it. What problems is it solving? And so all of these things, everybody has a slightly different perspective on them. And we're all roughly going between point A and point B, but how we go between point A and point B is different. And so actually, how do we create divergent opportunities from the kind of straight and narrow, predictable career path, where we don't have a single career, we don't have a job for life? And so we all kind of need to experiment, and it's not just down to how do we kind of wedge different minds into the current setup, but actually how can leaders be part of this change to whatever comes next? And it isn't well defined, but if we assume that people who think differently and who don't get on with the way that we do things perfectly now, we can assume that actually maybe they have some of the answers to where we might be going. And so actually I think part of this really is not just a leader that can enable people to function well, but also for leaders to seek different perspectives and actually take on some of that learning and actually see how this can inform change in the workplace, inform how they're going to show up. And so design really is, it's not just about well-designed products, or we often think about the Apple the iPhone is amazingly designed, and it is, but design touches everything. Design, we have organizational design, we have systems design, we have environment, interior design, but design does touch everything. Design touches our meetings, our performance reviews, the way that we conduct interviews. And this perhaps where I'm interested from a leader's point of view is we're kind of influencing outcomes. We're influencing people's experiences with just conversation, or the place where we're having the conversation, or what that agenda is, whether it's completely structured or unstructured. And so all of these different things are influencing what is happening at the end. And so design is really, it's a process, but it's also an outcome, and it's also about the leader as well. So I think
I think there's a reaching an initial point almost as a leader to realize that you can influence and make change in sometimes the smallest ways that has a massive impact, right? And certainly thinking about my world, thinking about leaders who coach, one of the toughest shifts for leaders to make is creating space for your direct report to explore. So, if I took what you're saying and laid it over, what we try and do with leaders who coach is to create an environment where it's thoughtful, it's the next 60 minutes is intentional in an outcome. And if we're designing ourselves and how we're showing up for our team members, it's okay, what do we want to get out of that? What is the design of this meeting? What's the flow here? And what is it? How can I create the best environment for you in the next 60 minutes to have the best thoughts, right? That you've had all day. And I think that's, if I applied the sort of design lens to it, that's kind of how I would describe it. And the hardest thing for leaders is this jumping to solutions. So everyone in our cohorts gets to sort of halfway through the course, has grasped and has experience of that strong desire to tell people what to do. And learning to let go is really difficult. But then they get over that hump and they go, yes, I did it. I created this space. I allowed them to talk. My role was to ask questions. So in that way, it's kind of designing what that experience is for people. And then we get the impact that we want because we've done something differently. But there must be other ways, right? In your mind, I mean, you've been on the Leaders Who Coach journey, and you're coming at this from, with your own lens of ADHD, but also this massive understanding of this space around neurodiversity and how important that is. What other, so meetings, how a leader shows up, what are some other aspects? So if we were to focus on a particular pain point, let's talk about facilitating meetings, for example. What are your thoughts about things that we could play around with and experiment with in terms of if, I'm facilitating a meeting with about 6 or 7 people?
Well, I think if you think about the meeting structure itself, so you might have, if you're looking for very specific outcomes, you might have maybe a quite tight agenda and actually set out a specific purpose or a specific problem to solve. On the other hand, if you're looking for creative ideation, you might do the opposite, where actually there might be less agenda and kind of more space for improv and going off on tangents. So understanding the designing and how you might understanding the outcome and how you might design that at the beginning, basically inviting diverse perspectives. Because what we can quite often find in meetings is that there might be 1 or 2 people with a lot to say, and there might be perhaps more dominant personalities who get the lion's share of the conversation. So designing it in a way which actually involves everybody and diverse perspectives, and it's not just necessarily the actual act of asking people. It's also setting the conditions. And so if you're perhaps quieter and don't like to speak up in group meetings, it's also about creating the kind of feeling, the sense that actually whatever you say will be kind of taken as is without kind of judgment. So it's kind of, it's not just about the specific act. It's about the kind of the feeling, the trust, and knowing that actually anything can be aired. And so actually, thinking about the kind of cultural conditions, thinking about the just about the feeling is another aspect.
I think the feeling is a massive one, Ben. And, in many conversations, we skip over feelings and uncomfortable feelings, or feelings that might feel very different to other people, or to what's being expressed by our peers and so on. I remember having a conversation recently with a cohort about, we do. I mean, if someone's got difficult feelings of feeling either left out of decision making, not involved in the team, not being heard, concerns about decisions being made, feeling disengaged in some way, those are really, they're really difficult feelings to surface. And yet they underpin this. They're the things that are going to determine whether you're going to have a great meeting or not, whether you're going to come up with great ideas or not, how generous people are feeling in that meeting if you're doing ideation. And so, and then also the fact that some people are really just very uncomfortable expressing those or can't articulate them, or then, you know, other people don't have that level of empathy and can't read or connect with the feelings that someone's talking about. So there's a lot going on, isn't there, in that meeting, if you're trying to just create that space where people are thinking generously, and you're building that emotional connection between people. Just even that, and there's loads of other things, right?
Yeah, and you know, there's basic things like time. You know, we automatically just block, you know, an hour in for a meeting just because it's just easy, because you know, engineers have created a you know, when you kind of click on your calendar, it automatically brings up an hour. So that in you know, in essence, basically shortcuts. You know, and what we think about actually, well, what about if we just did this in 10 minutes, or what about if we did a long form, you know, 2 or 3 hours? And yeah, so from my point of view, I probably get restless in sitting down in meetings or sitting down looking at a screen for too long. But in the same way that, you know, I might be distracted doing tasks which I'm not interested in, I'm actually not distracted doing things which I enjoy. And so actually, if a meeting is engaging and you have that reciprocity, and you have that kind of emotional connection, and you're doing something fun, and you know, there's a common purpose, and people can understand where we're heading, and actually we all value each other's diverse points of view, actually longer meetings great. You know, then experimenting, you know, between, you know, virtual and physical. We, you know, for me in general, virtual is probably a little bit more transactional, and so people kind of, you know, how can we have this kind of almost fixed agenda, because we're condensing everything into a small space, and we lose a lot of that depth, that kind of body language and that kind of feeling in the room. Whereas maybe in person, it's a bit more, actually, can we use this as an opportunity to build and deepen relationships and connections? And so kind of understanding, yeah, different dynamics. And yeah, I think we all have, touching back on Ian McGilchrist's work, that yeah, the transactional versus relational difference that maps onto, I think, the left and right hemisphere. Whereas you know, we're just looking to you know, kind of grab things or manipulate things or control things or persuade, and so that's very transactional. Okay, I need to get from here to here as quickly as possible. And so, but then there's other people that want to have conversation and learn about each other, and you know, deepen connections. And so a leader who designs understands, actually there's a time and a place for both, and different people have different preferences for this. And so there might be people that just predominantly want to have like a transactional, you know, work relationship, and actually, okay, but they're really efficient. And do we kind of push them to focus more on relationships, or do, you know, if or do we allow them to play to their strengths? And so I guess a leader who designs just tries to understand what are the kind of both, what are the differences and preferences, and actually how do we create spaces and opportunities for both to be valuable, and you know, build bridges, if you like, between different ways of communicating, learning, and everything else. And then I think the language is important as well, and thinking about, you know, taking things literally, and so some people who think differently to take things very literally. Again, it relates probably a little bit to the transactional language. So we're looking for very kind of explicit instructional language. And so somebody, in a meeting might say, "Oh, it's a bit hot in here." And some people might go, "What are you telling me that for?" And this is something which Ian McGilchrist uses as an example. Whereas somebody else will just intuitively get up and open the window. And so, some people are looking for very kind of precise language. Okay, what do you need me to do? Whether other people are read between the lines and actually focus on what's almost not being said, and like looking at body language and emotional expression and many other clues. So understanding we're all different, we're all picking up all these different cues. But also recognizing we're all roughly trying to go from A to B as well, and recognizing that we might zigzag off, or we might just deviate slightly, but we're all roughly going in the same direction, and that's okay.
And I find, I mean, there are so many nuances to this. Just if we think about language alone and being intentional in your choice of words, and then you have a group of people, you've got 6 or 7 other individuals who express and talk differently, use different language, different expressions. Some are very direct in their requests, and some are very indirect in their requests. The example you gave of, it's very hot in here, is an indirect request, right? For someone to open a window or to do something about the temperature, which may not get read by anyone because it wasn't a request as far as I received it. And so is that hard for leaders, do you think, to be so accommodating of these different nuances? Do you think that's a challenge too far?
It probably seems like it at the moment. And I think in part because, and this is the difference maybe between, design, leaders who design, and maybe leaders who manage processes. And so I think we just spend, again, it's like an industrial legacy thing, that we've created these really complicated workplaces with loads of different tools, often badly integrated. We've got loads of policies and procedures. We've got all these different ways of communicating and sharing information. We've got all of these other kind of processes, and I think we're so buried in that we've actually lost a lot of our ability to sense other people. And this is not just a problem to do with leaders and cognitive diversity. The whole of our society appears quite divided and polarized. And for me, that's a kind of one way of looking at it, and there's multiple reasons, but we don't understand each other. And we kind of just misunderstanding. We're kind of jumping to conclusions. And mentioned before that if we're kind of schooled with everybody that thinks and learns like us, and then we're thrown into a workplace where everybody's a bit different, and then the people managing us aren't really managing. They're kind of managing a process. And I think all of these problems just accumulate over time. And I think we've kind of got to the point where actually there are just so many kind of nuances that it's really difficult to learn. But we would have automatically done this if we grew up around diverse people, and all of this wouldn't have to be an educational process. So I think there's a kind of real grassroots need that actually it's important that we learn alongside others who are different.
Well, right. Well, that doesn't happen. Even you think about your education, if you're exposed to it at all, it's a teeny tiny bit of your education, right? Or learning about other cultures and so on. And there's definitely, without going off on a tangent there, I think there's definitely room for expanding what we teach our kids and help them understand and put them in situations that maybe do feel different, safe environments, but feel so that it becomes a little less alien or a little less uncomfortable to be in that space and know how to operate within it. And I think, my question around, is it too much for leaders to kind of have to make this other shift? But actually, no, in the context that you've described, where we've got all these tools and we've outsourced so many things and apps and so on, what we're actually talking about is about simplifying things down and becoming more aware of our fellow humans. Yeah. And being able to tune into that more and then respond, act, and speak in a sensitive way that invites people to feel involved, to feel included, and to feel valued. So for a leader, let's say, who's interested in your course, what kind of mindset do you think it takes? Who would you welcome into the course? What is it that would make for let's say a great cohort? I don't know, what are the, is it collaboration? Is it being curious? Is it willing to experiment and try things out?
Yeah, well, I think just on the last point that I think it does seem like an awful lot, and I think this is for a leader to juggle everything right now, and then new terminology, multiple meanings to the terminology, constantly changing perceptions of the terminology. It is really difficult, and sometimes we can get buried in the jargon and the kind of abstract concepts. But I think fundamentally we've just created a really complicated world, and we don't really know how anything works. So actually there's a benefit to just simplifying what it is we're doing and why we're doing it, and how we do it. And we tend to just basically reach for kind of more policies, more processes, more systems. But actually, another way, again, kind of simplifying it, and a different hemisphere take would be, how do we take things away? How do we kind of simplify rather than constantly adding to them? And so, I think that it's with thinking about design. Design isn't design is trying to see things as a system and see all of the interconnections. And so organizations trying to embrace, or leaders trying to embrace, cognitive diversity, it has multiple touch points. And cognitive, just basically changing your job adverts or changing your policies, that's not enough to do things well. So there has to be kind of simultaneous changes and kind of understanding how cognitive diversity intersects everything. And that's what I mean by design touches everything. It's kind of it's kind of understanding how the kind of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We can make lots of little kind of changes, but it's really how they come together which creates the kind of change. And that's where I'm trying to think about the future of work and how technology is changing things and everything else. But so in terms of the cohort, I think that design really is it's about the process, it's about the outcome, it's about what it is we're trying to achieve, but it's also about the character as well. And so we do a lot of work in Western cultures on personality, the big 5 personality types, but we don't talk too much about character. And I think that you kind of weave through some ideas in your course, but we kind of forget. We just rush on to do what are we doing rather than who are we. And so I kind of basically think about design as a mindset. a skill set, a tool set, and a knowledge set, if you like. So there's and how do we kind of start building knowledge and understanding, which I'm trying to do through the course, about cognitive diversity and how it intersects with the workplace. How can we start? Mindset of a designer is quite similar to the mindset of a leader who coaches, and it's about kind of it's about holding space. It's about seeing change. It's about creating change, and you do that through how you show up in a coaching scenario. But it's also a kind of skill set as well. And so I introduce, each week has a different skill, and you mentioned a few of them, curiosity, experimentation, reframing problems, and what we perceive as problems with people who are neurodiverse, we can quickly reframe them actually into opportunities. And so impulsivity is an example for ADHD. It might be really kind of bad if we're just having to kind of sit still and be quiet for a few hours, but actually can we reframe impulsivity into a positive trait for entrepreneurship? And so think, how do we create more entrepreneurial opportunities, which is really about sensing opportunities and reacting to them rather than being paralyzed by analysis. And so kind of the opposite of impulsivity is also, we just don't do anything. And so kind of reframing some of these traits which we think are negative into positive. Same with hyperactivity. Well, we weren't designed to sit still the whole time. So actually, how do we make learning and work more active? And that's how I think, and that's how I function well. And so, reframing, thinking about design as a process, as a journey, thinking about it as a collaborative, venture. So you can think about co-design principles, and so co-design really is not designing, imposing design changes on people. It's designing with people, and a bit like power, rather than power over people, it's power with people. So, and then thinking about stories as well, and how we use design to tell stories and share what we're doing to a wider audience. And that's part of like an awareness piece and an education piece around how change happens and how we make our workplaces more neuro-inclusive. And so who am I looking for? I think just anybody who's not just simply interested in cognitive diversity and neurodiversity as a means to an end, but as a kind of means to explore how they create change in both their role as a leader, but also their workplace. And I think that it's not an instrument, but it's a kind of way to actually people who think differently are ultimately shaping the future. And so actually how do leaders not just kind of use that to their advantage, but actually how do we kind of co-create the future? And so and I think just understanding how just different thinking patterns and different skill sets aren't things to control or eliminate, but they're actually just, how do we kind of reframe them into healthy strengths or constructive differences. So I don't know if that kind of helps. And any kind of thoughts really on who works for your course, and actually is there an overlap there which you see?
I think there's a massive overlap, and I'd say almost diversity of thought for leaders is a way to extend or keep learning in that space, and especially if you are leading tech teams, where I definitely see a lot of cognitive diversity within teams. I think that actually presents an opportunity to experiment. And the thing that, as you were talking, the two things that kind of were tossing around in my head, one was perfection. there's no room for perfection here anywhere. This is, and it's very, and the other word is experimentation. It's very much about, you know, having the space to experiment and maybe think about what you can do as a leader for yourself, but also for members of your team, and just being able to flex. Where can you let go a little bit of this need to have all the answers, to be the person that tells, and where can you create that opportunity for co-creation, as you were talking about, right? And collaboration, because actually that solves one of the biggest pain points for a lot of leaders, which is, how can I make my team or my direct reports more accountable? And that's in a, you know, that's positioning it in a positive way, because the more that somebody owns, the more that people are part of a co-creation, the easier accountability comes, because we've allowed space and time for, you know, creating emotional attachment to ideas, to people we're talking with, to, you know, how our input, and to visualize what the ideas, where they could go as well. So, you know, that can be really, really powerful. So yeah, I think it is, you know, it's a space to come and explore, really. I think your course too, but you don't need to have done Leaders Who Coach as a course. I know you applied some of the sort of skills and concepts that we talk about in Leaders Who Coach, but that's not necessary to do your course. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for leaders to come in and go, okay, I recognize there are some differences in my team, and I would love to unlock those for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of the individuals. How can I do that? What could I play around with? What could I try out and do differently? And I think that's what your course is offering people.
Yeah, and I think that's a nice summary. And you know, just everything that we do changes us, and so, you know, we get better at coaching our colleagues and helping our colleagues. That makes us better. That helps us develop. And you know, design is about change. So everything that we design, you know, not only impacts other people, but it impacts who we are. So everything that we kind of experiment with and change. And so, you know, understanding that, you know, you talk about, you know, the need for integrity, you know, when you're showing up in kind of coaching conversations. And it's really important in design, because, you know, we've created, you know, I'm not talking about this, but actually, if you think about, you know, designing algorithms or designing apps, we're having people that, you know, design algorithms and apps which potentially affect billions of people. And you know, there's talk about accountability. So actually, when we're designing, we're shaping how other people think and experience the world. And so we also need to be kind of really conscious about what it is we're changing, what our intentions are, you know, what our goals are, and are people aware of what we're doing? You know, is this transparent? Are they part of the process, and do they have buy-in? And you know, this isn't just something which, as you say, leaders do, and it can feel a little bit overbearing if it's just you as a leader just doing this. And you know, the workplace is too complicated, and the, you know, world is too complex for one person to have all of the answers, to know all of the different perspectives, to have all of the different skill sets. It's about teams, and you know, we don't want everybody having the kind of same model, the same understanding of the problem or of the kind of industry which we're working in. Different perspectives have a lot of value, and it's, you know, being a leader who design not only creates change, but also, you know, it is about them, you know, changing themselves, because every piece of new information, every new perspective is rewiring our brain. It is changing us. So we're kind of part of that, you know, never-ending process of change. And we need to change quite a lot. You know, it's a bit of a generic sweeping statement, but there's just so many things which will change, which we can't even imagine now. And either that change will happen to us, or we will be part of that journey. So I think there's it's design or be designed. Is a phrase which springs to mind. So
yeah. So this is probably, if anyone would like to find out more about Ben's course, Diversity of Thought for Leaders, do check it out. There's the details. If you go to betterconversations.co, you will locate it for sure. And do reach out to Ben as well. You can get him on LinkedIn. And just if you've got any questions at all about the course or any of his work, do reach out to him, because I think any organization really or team that is looking to rethink or just have a bit of time to consider what they could be doing differently that would benefit everyone, not just neurodiverse colleagues, I think would be a fascinating thing. So I wondered whether I could put you on the spot again, Ben, and ask you, what would be 3 things that leaders could do this afternoon, for example, that might create an interesting shift in interactions between them and their team?
Well, one thing which I want to mention is that reflect on what you think is a human being, because everything, we don't make it explicit, but everything that we design is designed on an assumption of what a human being is. So the reason why we have the kind of free market, public schools, tools and technology, social media, it's an aspect of human nature. Is human nature just about goals? Is it just about social standing? Is being human just about the experience? Is it about thoughts and feelings? Because I get a sense that if we just assume people and colleagues are resources, or we see them as heads or overheads, or we see them as numbers, we basically design and create work environments which basically treat people like that. So I think basically part of what I'm trying to explore going forward is how do we kind of reimagine what it is to be human when machines are better at being machines than we are, and so just basically just reflect on what you think a human is. What are your assumptions which you're bringing to the table when you conduct a performance review, when you organize a meeting, when you do anything in the workplace? What are your expectations of what that person should be and how they should function? And just reflect on it and see if you notice anything in the coming weeks which shifts your perspective slightly. I think another thing which, again, thinking about character, is that a lot of this is complicated, and you're going to make mistakes. But I think as a leader, having no conversation, not trying things, means that things will be ignored and maybe problems get worse. So I think it's better to be kind than right. So actually kind of showing up, looking out for colleagues, just, asking if they're okay unexpectedly, or, just reaching out unexpectedly, being prepared to ask questions. So I think that's incredibly important. And that's part of the design process. That's part of creating change. It's part of making somebody else feel differently and work differently. And then just maybe experiment with things we can't measure. You know, we're very kind of focused on things that we can analyze and measure and control and whatnot. But you know, just changing spaces, thinking about what could you do to build trust, and you know, how can you deepen, you know, relationships with people, because to design and actually change people's workspace, that has to be built on a sense of trust and understanding. And so yeah, so there's a sense of, okay, you know, what is a human being? Can't remember what, yeah, better to be kind. So actually, how can you practice kindness and compassion? And that's better than being right. And to your point about, you know, being precise and accurate and not making mistakes, we're human. And so actually, I think if you've got good intentions, that's really important. And yeah, I'm not saying don't measure things. I'm not saying don't monitor and, you know, systematize things, but also focus on the things that we can't see, because actually that's incredibly important. So cultivating that sense of, you know, psychological safety, and you know, how we go about that, you know, that's probably for another show, another conversation.
Oh,
But
that is.
Yeah.
Well, I love all of that. Sometimes you just need to be a friend to the person in front of you, and not, you know, for a moment or a few moments, put everything to one side and just listen and just be that friend, right? Absolutely. And we can that you can guarantee that you will, you know, the pull of coming back to process and protocol and so on will always be there, because that's our construct. The harder thing is to pull away from that and just be present with someone, right? So yeah, I love what you said. Well, fantastic. So folks, do check out Ben's course. You'll find details about him, about the curriculum for the 6 weeks, enrollment details, more information also about Ben on the website. And of course, do reach out to Ben if you've got any other questions. We will post up also the you'll see come up on the screen the links to the previous two part 1 and part 2 in this series with Ben. So do check those out. And also take the time to check out maybe some of the other conversations that Ben has been in on the YouTube channel. So you'll find that by searching for Better Conversations. And make sure you subscribe. If you like this, let us know. Also, give it a thumbs up, and drop any questions or comments in the discussions. Okay, folks. So thank you, Ben. That was a really lovely series, and you know, I think there's a lot that just even in this series that you've given generously of your time to you know, to talk with me on Better Conversations Live, to have for leaders to take away a lot of food for thought. So yeah, you know, I'm looking forward to the conversations that come out of the cohorts that you lead. So anything final to say before I wrap us up?
No, just thank you for hosting me. It's been a pleasure chatting with you last 3 weeks. So I don't know what I'm going to do next week, but I've got a hole in my diary. But yeah, no, it's been great. Great hanging out. So yeah, I think there's lots here, and I think that, yeah, there's probably something for everybody, and there's lots of different jumping off points to explore about various different subjects. Yeah, if people have got questions, reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect with me, and yeah, it'd be nice to explore this further. So happy to help out.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben.
Cool.
So we are going to take a couple of weeks break as I relocate office and space. But do check out all our other videos on YouTube. You'll find us by searching for Better Conversations, and look out for our headshots or whatever is related to leaders who coach, diversity of thought, and so on. You will find us there. If you have any questions, you want to come on and chat to us, talk about an area of particular interest to yourself, that you think is really important for leaders to know about or to explore or to play around with, then do reach out to us on BC Live at betterconversations.co. Until then, we'll see you in a little while, but thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, enjoyed it. Good luck with the move.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.
See you.